And we are back. It is another edition of Colts Corner with myself, Kevin Bowen, and Eddie Garrison across the way. 1 week from today, Eddie, that would be Tuesday, live at the Combine. So we will be down there for the umpteenth year in a row, it seems like, and certainly always a favorite week of mine. I know there are some people that are a little negative about it from a media standpoint, but man, it just seems like the Colts have had one of the quieter off seasons of any team, and it always spurs action. Like I feel like, oh, all of a sudden here we are, franchise tag window, boom, combine. Oh, free agency's 3 weeks away. Okay, then like once you get through those like 2 weeks of free agency, then it's like, oh wait, off-season program's about to start. Oh wow, it's the draft, and I'm like, all right, here we go. Weather's improving. Let's go. So I always enjoy this time of year, and yeah, I'm looking forward to next week. How are you, sir?
I'm well. How was your anniversary yesterday and Valentine's Day last week?
No, thank you for that. I appreciate the text as well. Yeah, we had a very nice Valentine's Day anniversary.
Now, how many more of these do you think she can do? Because I know she has to put up with a lot.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm just happy we've got it through 7 of them. Yeah, to say the least there. So that sounded a little harsh from you, but very deserved by you as well. So weather is breaking here in Indy. We did a little pinheads action on Saturday with the kids. Have you ever done little pinheads action?
Yeah.
Gosh, we had a rocking time there.
It's a good spot.
Honestly, we arcaded it up more than we did bowling action there. So, I mean, is there anything more exhilarating than the claw machine?
No.
Oh, my gosh.
Is Max Bowen infatuated with the claw?
Rosie, for sure.
Oh, is she like the little aliens in Toy Story?
Yeah, and then our niece, Ellen, was unbelievable at
the claw.
Oh, yeah. I can picture that Toy Story episode, or that Toy Story segment, 1,000%. So, yeah, we had a great time there, and here we are, kind of the final quiet-ish weekend here before things get started. Today's pod will focus on Shane Steichen as a head coach. Last week we focused on Chris Ballard, the good, the bad, the wins, the losses, however you want to assess Ballard in terms of his GM tenure, and for Steichen, year 3 as a head coach. So there's always a lot on the Steichen plate, and we'll evaluate that and get to a few Twitter questions. Let's start with just how the calendar goes, Eddie. Again, we're recording this on Tuesday morning, February 17th. The franchise tag window is now open for 2 weeks. I will continue to reiterate what I've done here over the last month or so. I think Alec Pierce is more viable than Daniel Jones. I can listen to debates on both, certainly, but I do think Pierce, it makes a little bit more sense to tag him. And, one thing to remind our audience about with Michael Pittman Jr. a couple years ago, they tagged him, and then they got the deal done before the new league year.
Yeah.
Which you don't have to do. You've got, I should double check this, but I believe you have until like July to try for the extension, if that's a route that you want to go down. So obviously I'll be curious if that is the plan of attack with Pierce. A, do you tag him? B, do you try to get it done for the new league year? Or C, do you wait? And if I'm not mistaken, I forget who some of the wideouts were, but that Pittman contract aged pretty well within that offseason. There are a lot of wideouts that I think ended up signing either new contracts or extensions that, 3 for $70, whatever Pittman got, ended up looking decent. Now, of course, right now you're sitting with a $29 million cap hit for this season, and we'll see exactly how that plays out. But I think that's kind of the biggest news item to watch is what will the next 2 weeks play out. Again, they used pretty much the entire window before they officially tagged Pittman. So I assume they'll wait if they're going to do anything with that. And that'll be a news item to keep an eye on.
Obviously, Kevin, the sooner a tag is applied usually means the further off the two sides are. And I feel like if you use the tag as close as you possibly can to the end of the window, that typically means there's been some good communication back and forth between player, his agent, and the franchise on negotiating that contract extension.
Yeah, yes, I think that's a very good point to bring up. We had, I don't think many are in this category, but we still had someone bring up today, hey, if it's a Pittman or Pierce debate, I can't believe people are, thinking that replacing Pittman's 70, 80 catches are going to be easy. I don't want it to seem like a slap in the face with Pittman at all, but again, what's the harder trait to find? The harder trait to find is Pierce's trait than it is Pittman's trait. So yeah, should be on the news item list. Next week at the Combine, obviously Charvarius Ward. What is his status for next season? We'll see about any lingering coaching decisions, if there's anything more on the Anthony Richardson senior front. So those are some of the news items. I did think nationally, Eddie, you saw what the Miami Dolphins did yesterday, parting ways with obviously some marquee players in Tyreek Hill and Bradley Chubb and who else? James Daniels. I think the kid from IU, Westbrook Akide as well. But that's kind of what this time of year is about, particularly new GMs and new coaching staffs. How much of that roster do they want to slice up? And particularly the aging ones, particularly the expensive ones. Bradley Chubb, when healthy, has been very productive the last couple of seasons, sandwiched around the ACL. I continue to like Adolfo Owe, with the Chargers. And obviously the Trey Hendrickson franchise tag storyline will be one to watch as well, league-wide, over the next 2 weeks. But, free agency really gets set 2 weeks from today. For right now, like I see all this, hey, Alec Pierce could go to the Patriots, Alec Pierce could go here. It's like, well, if the Colts want to, they just tag them. And it's over. I mean, it's largely over. So that's why I do feel like you always kind of have to get through the franchise tag window, and then you can really start to debate, how things could look.
Was that the offseason where Amon-Ra St. Brown got 4 for 120, A.J. Brown got 3 for 96, and Jefferson got his money? Was that all?
Sounds right. Yeah, that does. So, when you give out these extensions, and I would think Pierce will have a pretty competitive market if indeed he does go there. So for those that are trying to look at the Alec Pierce family tree, his brother, Caden, did commit to Purdue to play basketball over the weekend. He is a Princeton product, and so he will play his final year of college basketball at Purdue, which for those unfamiliar with Indiana geography or anything, Purdue's about an hour and a half up I-65, just northwest of Indianapolis. So I don't know if that will have any impact whatsoever on Alec Pierce's decision, but nonetheless.
Yeah, Nico got 3 years, 72.75. Jalen Waddle, 3 for 84.75. And DJ Moore got that 4 for 110, and IU got 4 for 120 that offseason.
So Nico only $2 million more than Pittman over 3 years?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Well, not even that. 24.25.
I thought you said 3 for 72. Wasn't Pittman 3 for 70?
Yeah.
Gosh, man. That's crazy.
Yeah. Let's get into evaluating Shane Steichen, starting with the wins. We'll start with the Daniel Jones growth, Kevin.
Yeah, to me, this is a definite win. I mean, you have a player that had not reached this level of play in his, 6, 7 seasons in the NFL. 6, 7 seasons in the NFL, and yet you
didn't just do that, did you?
Here in Indianapolis. Was that good or bad?
That was bad.
Okay. Thank you.
At least it's not the QR crap that Jake Query's trying to start. Come on.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you and I are on the same page with that.
Yeah.
Obviously the Anthony Richardson project, however you want to call it, hasn't worked out. But, whether it's Minshew, I don't want to put too much into Flacco, such a small sample size. But, whether you want to look at Minshew or Jones, I mean, I think both of them have reached a level of their play that is some of the best, if not the best, in their respective careers. And, Shane was bullish on Daniel Jones from day one. And, I think eventually we kind of got there of like, okay, this is actually going to happen. So, that presence of Steichen, and I'm not saying like, oh, all of a sudden fundamentally you've changed his throwing this or that. No, maybe it's just a level of confidence. Maybe it's really catering to plays and concepts that he does particularly well. Clearly in his time in the NFC East, Shane Steichen observed some things that he felt like could be possible with Daniel Jones. So I think that's a definite win for Shane Steichen.
And the other win that you've got on 1075thefan.com would be the historic offensive stretch. And you said, in general, what the Colts did offensively for the first 2 months of this season is some of the best football we've seen on that side of the ball in franchise history. From a play calling standpoint, you remain high on Steichen. Is he perfect? You say no. But this is a Colts offense that has still produced a top 10 scoring unit despite having to start Phillip Rivers and Riley Leonard for nearly a quarter of the season. Steichen gives the Colts a strong offensive mind. Yeah,
I continue to be pretty high on Shane Steichen offensively. I think, again, the numbers dating back to 2023 are impressive when you didn't have maybe as much either at quarterback or around the the quarterback. It probably should be noted they changed a couple of offensive line pieces too, and that has seemingly gone pretty well. And again, you finished top 10 in scoring, and you had Phillip Rivers and Riley Leonard start 4 games for you. So I think that also stands out to me. So I think just to kind of summarize where the wins are, I think offensively as a unit, relatively consistent scoring. I would start there. And then for the most part, there is one big miss at quarterback, but they have gotten some good level of play at quarterback with guys that were definitely either cast-offs or however you want to label them, hadn't played nearly to that level throughout their respective NFL careers. So specifically to last year, Eddie, it was that historic offensive stretch. But I think if you look at the 54 game sample size of Steichen, for the most part, I think the offensive play has been pretty good.
Yeah, you mentioned the quarterback play. That's where one of the 3 losses that you wrote on 1075thefan.com in this section, or losses, I should say, and to be determined, would be the Anthony Richardson project. It is trending towards the marriage coming up in a divorce between Richardson and Indianapolis. This was a misidentification pre-draft and then a mishandling of the developmental project. Steichen was more than on board with the selection of Richardson, but clearly the Colts underestimated the attention needed and the full-on commitment to seeing what is there with the former number 4 overall pick.
We've talked a lot about Richardson specifically here on this podcast, so I won't belabor the point too much, but it was... there are misses at every level, whether that is the scouting level, whether that's the coaching level, whether that's the individual player level, and, him meeting the standards that you have for him. But I would say there was just a misjudgment in exactly what the project would take and that undertaking. If you want to look at Jalen Hurts, Justin Herbert, or Phillip Rivers, they came from very different quarterback backgrounds. Their college experiences were very different. Shane has had great success with past quarterbacks, but I would argue none of them sniffed the rawness nature of Richardson. And so I think that was where you kind of just flat out missed, really, of like, hey, how many games did Hurts start in college? He played, and then he played at Alabama and Oklahoma and played in college football playoff game, played at a very high level as well. So I think that's where the miss was in Richardson's judgment.
Number 2, in terms of the losses and things still to be determined, beating the Texans and the Jaguars. I'll let you take this one, KB.
Yeah, the record stands for 2-10 is just. It's just awful, especially when you look at both of those franchises, and in particular with Jacksonville. Obviously they've made a coaching change. It's not like this is whatever the Chiefs with Mahomes or Josh Allen and the Bills there. So I think that is something that really stands out. DeMeco Ryans, of course, hired in the same coaching cycle as Shane. I think Shane Steichen might have been the runner-up to DeMeco Ryans in Houston, and it's a broken record. Divisional games mean more. And the Colts have wilted oftentimes late in the season. When you think about the wins, Eddie, so you are 2-10. The 2 wins are what? C.J. Stroud's first ever divisional game. I believe C.J. Stroud's second game overall was that win down there in Houston. And then you beat, I want to say it was Mac Jones maybe, in Jacksonville in overtime in that meaningless game 2 years ago in the final game of the season. So, that I think is something too that also... it's just frustrating, and it's why this divisional drought now is extended for an 11th straight year.
And the final thing, when you evaluate Shane Steichen, is finding other ways to get it done. Shane Steichen is an accomplished offensive mind, and you firmly believe that. But as a head coach, his teams are 25-26. And a record of 7-22 against teams above 500. The Colts have to find ways to win games without a banner day offensively. They are 3-17. Look at that, 3-17, Kevin. In games when they score 20 points or fewer. To put that in perspective, the Texans are 8-14 in such games, as they now have 3 playoff wins in the last 3 years. The Colts have to find ways to win games in different, uglier fashion. A score of 20-17 or 17-13 or 19-16 might pop up a time or two in a season. It might be necessary when you are down a starting quarterback. That's reality in handling adversity. The Colts must do it better.
Yeah, that last part, I know it maybe doesn't have as much black and white. I tried to put a couple of numbers in there to back it up, but in general, the 7-22 against teams better than 500, that obviously is a frustrating element to it. But I would say more than that, it's just again finding ways to win differently. A 17-week NFL season is a bleeping grind. It's not going to be historic offense throughout. That's just not the reality of the league. Attrition has a lot to do with it. Sometimes just frankly how your schedule's divvied up. I think this past year was an example of an easier start and a more difficult finish. And so as teams, start to scout you and take away things that you're doing well, can you find other ways to win? Jonathan Taylor's not running at a historic level like he was through the first 2 months of the season. Are you able to win with one hand tied behind your back, a little bit left-handed? And I don't think the Colts have been very good at that at all, really, under Steichen. And, okay, why? Is this you have such an offensive-minded head coach that maybe defensively you aren't able to win these sorts of games? And I don't, there's been times, Seattle game comes to mind, where your defense has held them to a point total that you feel like it's enough, but you still aren't able to get it done. So many people have pointed back to that Seattle Colts game from back in December, and it's like that is the outlier in Seattle's season, or one of the outliers. The question is, when you are faced with some of those, we're off our game, it's a B performance. Again, the right hand is tied behind our back. Can you still find a way to get a win? If Seattle doesn't win that game, they don't have the number 1 overall seed, and who knows how it plays out. Finding ways to still scratch, claw, and fight and get a win when it's ugly is vital. It's a key ingredient to success. And, this to me is something we talked about in the Ballard pod last week, Eddie. This team has wilted down the stretch. In the Ballard era, this 5 years straight of missing the playoffs, we've gone over how the December and Januaries have been so disappointing for this team. I think a lot of these sorts of games can pop up late in years. You go back to the Houston game, what was that? Right after Thanksgiving this season. Not a very high-scoring game, but again, found a way to win. Obviously, Houston's defense well documented this season and be able to get that done. And 8-14, it's obviously not a great record for the Texans, but when you put it up next to the Colts record of 3-17 in the same time frame, that is why, Houston is been to 3 straight playoffs and won a playoff game in each of these 3 years. All of those things, I think, are reasons why, as a head coach, DeMeco Ryans has been able to find other ways, even if Nico Collins is missing, even if CJ Stroud is out. Oh, Davis Mills is starting for 3 games? Oh, wow. How about if we win those 3 games? That is not something that the Colts have been able to do.
What can Shane do differently to kind of prevent those collapses at the end of the season as the head coach?
Yeah, I think there is an element of some of it is roster. I think a little bit of you have to create more depth. But I think some of it is embracing a little bit of that uglier nature. To me, I think Shane's focus is so offensive-centric that you at times can lose sight of, hey, this is more of a 12-round boxing match, and how are we going to be able to find a way to get it done? And, as the head coach, you're also the overseer of that defensive unit. And that's where I keep on coming back to, of whether it was keeping Gus Bradley for another year, whether it's not demanding more defensive personnel changes. Those things have clearly hurt this team. It's been more defense than I think it is offense. I know Shane has tried to do some things where it's like, hey, do we implement more situational football within practice settings? Boom, all of a sudden you stop practice and you create a 2-minute drill. Those sorts of things. I go back to the Rams-Bears playoff game, Eddie, when Chicago has all those heroics late to force overtime.
Yeah.
It was just kind of a shock, right?
Yeah.
And Soldier Field is rocking. And, NFL film showed Sean McVay huddling that team together. And, that is, again, an offensive-minded head coach that very easily could sit there and say, hey, I got to worry about the coin flip and whatever this call sheet's going to look like on that opening drive. But he had the wherewithal or the pulse of the team in that moment to say, I need to call everybody together. We need to regroup as a 53-man roster, not just my offensive unit. And, it obviously led to them getting it done in overtime. I think some of that stuff is just a little bit more of an understanding of the entire team. Each unit goes into it. I'm not just the play caller and the head coach. And I'll continue to say it is difficult, I think, to handle all of these duties, but to be able to have the understanding of, again, the pulse of everybody. And I thought McVay, for example, had that beautifully in that moment to understand, boy, we just got literally kicked in the you-know-what.
Yeah.
I mean, it is stunning this game is going to overtime. How are we going to react? Let's make sure that our psyche is there.
Matt Bowen of ESPN just released this morning, Kevin, on the best fit for the top 50 free agents in the 2026 NFL free agency. According to their rankings, Trey Hendrickson's number one, his best fits with the Indianapolis Colts. They've got Daniel Jones, best team fit with the Colts. Pierce, best team fit, shockingly, with the Tennessee Titans. And Braden Smith with the Houston Texans.
Yeah, I guess a couple things. First off, on the Hendrickson front, we should mention reports Marion Hobby, the new defensive line coach. He comes over from time in Cincinnati with Lou Anarumo, so Anarumo continues to tap into his own family tree, whether it's with personnel or with position coaches. And I think Hobby was in the college ranks. I want to say maybe Arkansas was where he was looking to be coaching last year before Charlie Partridge, or this year before Charlie Partridge left to go to Notre Dame. So Hendrickson, of course, would know Marion Hobby well. I don't know if I'm 100% sold on the Hendrickson thing. Again, I know a lot of people, when you're talking about free agents, everybody has flaws. Everybody. They're on the open market for a reason. Him or Bradley Chubb, you're not really getting younger with that. Worry about probably the health of Hendrickson a little bit more there. And then what do you want out of edge? Do you want to try to swing for the homer, or do you want to try to get a couple singles or a single and a double? I've said about this offseason, you need to go out and find a starter opposite Latu and a starting linebacker, and then I think you got to get one more. So that's where I kind of look at it and say, all right, spend money for a starter in free agency, come back in day 2 of the draft, round 2 or 3 needs to be a defensive end as well. I feel like I sound like a Little League coach, but just because little Mark has struck out every time up to bat, it doesn't mean you tell him to keep leaving the bat on his shoulders. No. You get the bat off your shoulders. You got to keep swinging.
Yeah.
And I've got people that gripe at me all the time of like, you're really thinking the Colts should draft another edge rusher? Ballard has swung and missed all the time. Well, he's the man calling the shots, unless you got news for me.
Right.
You have to continue to swing. That position means that much to your football team there. So, Braden Smith, we played some Anthony Costanzo audio. Jack Doyle does a great podcast over with the Colts with Matt Taylor during the season. And then he's had a couple interviews after the season with players. He had Costanzo on, and AC, who's just an offensive line technician. He's very, very complimentary with Braden Smith and just his level. But again, you can't pay everybody.
Right.
And you've passed the torch really well at center with Bordolini from Ryan Kelly, at right guard with Matt Gonzalez from Will Fries, and now can you do it with Jalen Travis and Braden Smith? That would be the question I have. Braden has been decently healthy over the last 2 years. Obviously, 2 years ago, he had the OCD. This past year, I'm pretty sure he was really healthy until the concussion late in the season. Now that ended his year.
Yeah.
But, he has had a little bit of a better health record here the last 2 years. Physically, that is. Especially lower body. I think Nick Cross is the hardest free agent.
Yeah. I agree.
I will continue to bang that home here over the next few weeks because he is an ascending young player, which is what you thought when you drafted him. He's one of the few recent defensive draft picks this team has selected, and he's played well.
Mm-hmm.
You want to bring him back. But having said that, can you pay 2 safeties major money? Are you able to, I guess, just make that work is probably the easiest way to put it. But then there's the other bird on the shoulder that says, Kevin, name the backup safeties for the Colts right now.
Well, that's the beauty of the draft and free agency, Kevin. They can easily replace it that way.
Yeah, and again, easier to replace. I mean, not everybody's Craig Woodson, who's a 4th-round pick of the Patriots and comes in and plays every defensive snap or the most defensive snaps for you. Like, I get that safety is a position where you have found, I think league-wide, you can find some stopgaps. But
Is that the most fungible defensive position?
yeah, that or linebacker probably. Yeah.
Yeah, probably linebacker. You're right.
So Cross is difficult. If you're trying to get younger on defense, isn't he pretty young? So, yeah, we'll see how it all plays out.
All right, final thing here before we get to Twitter questions. Daniel Jeremiah of NFL Network, who does a really good job with Move the Sticks podcast and his coverage of the Combine, with Rich Eisen on the TV side, just released his second mock draft literally 30 minutes ago. This was about 10 o'clock. He's got 2 Notre Dame players in the first round.
Oh.
Pretty obvious who number one of them is. He's got Jeremiah Love going 9th to Kansas City. And boy, can you imagine if the Chiefs draft Jeremiah Love?
I have seen that.
He still has Fernando Mendoza going number 1. And the other Notre Dame player that shocked me a little bit, Kevin, who do you think it is?
Well, I know he was high, I believe, on Billy Shrouth at one point, offensive guard, but I'm going to guess he's a big measurable guy. I'm going to guess he's got Malachi Fields in there.
He does. He's got him 26 to Buffalo.
Now, I get Alec Pierce vibes from Fields. Just the ability to kind of moss some plays. I mean, if you want to see some wild catches, just throw in the Pittsburgh highlight reel of him. Honestly, he's a big, I've said this to people before. I felt better about Notre Dame entering the playoffs this year than I did last year. Now, obviously, they didn't make it, but for that week period that I thought they were in, I thought they were more potent to get on a run. They didn't have a Fields on the national runner-up team. And Fields was a one-year transfer from Virginia. And I know he had a really good Senior Bowl. And I think I did a mock draft look on our website, Eddie. I think there was somebody that had him falling to 47 to the Colts, actually, there in round 2. So that's interesting. Jeremiah usually is a very outside-of-the-box thinker with some of this stuff. So, boy, that would be...
yeah, especially with his ties formerly with the Chargers. He still works for the Chargers, right, in terms of... I think he's their analyst for radio or something.
Preseason TV, does that sound...
Yeah, something like that. But
radio as well?
Yeah, he worked in their front office at one point, so...
Gotcha.
I know he's got connections to, scouts, GMs, and I like to look at his stuff over some other people.
Yeah.
Dane Brugler with the Athletics is also really good, too.
Did he have Dylan Thieneman at all, speaking of local guys?
He did.
As a safety, he had him in round 1?
Yeah, he had him. Let me find that again. I think it was top half of the draft.
Wow, really? Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, 18. So right in that middle to Minnesota.
Gotcha.
Is where he had him.
Purdue player for our local audience out there. That's a Westfield guy. So, yeah, that is, wow.
Calls him an excellent replacement for Harrison Smith.
There you go.
You ready for Twitter questions?
Let's do it.
We've got 3 of them, starting with Joel. It seemed like starting with the Colts-Steelers game, the run game, was not the same. JT could not even get 47 yards on a second-string Texans defense. Is the offensive line grossly overrated? Is Jonathan Taylor overrated? Or is there something that I am not considering? I have not seen such a tale of 2 halves of a season running the football in all my years watching the Colts.
Yeah, Joel, it's a great question. I don't think it's one we've probably discussed enough. I do think sustaining run game success is difficult. Now, the offensive line, yeah, it started to get a little banged up there late in the season, but it still stayed pretty healthy even with some of the poor games. And I always go back to this, Eddie. In 2021 with Carson Wentz is just quarterback play late in the year, they still ran it great with Taylor. Great with him. So that's where I do struggle a little bit with this, but man, the yards per carry numbers, it's just wild. I just pulled up Taylor's numbers from the Pittsburgh game that and on. I mean, I guess you're 7-1 going to Pittsburgh that Joel references here. These are the yards per carry the rest of the season. 3.2, 7.6, that would be Atlanta in Germany. 3.6, 4.0, 3.5, 3.5, 2.9, 3.3, 1.9. I mean, every single game, 4 or less.
And he wasn't on the injury report once.
Not once. I don't even missed a day of practice, even for rest. It's just, and that's the one that Taylor is starting to get. And I don't think he looked injured or anything to me, but like he is starting to reach that age of, and certainly the carry number. People can do this math more than I. Maybe I should do it in the offseason. Taylor is reaching the carry number of, think back to our Hard Knocks episode, with Joe Shane and what was it? Was it Frank Gore? Maybe it was Frank Gore. Or no, it was Taylor's agent, right? It was Malky Kawa on the sideline of that. I think it was him. I could be totally off on this. But they were debating the Saquon Barkley thing. And, when running backs reach that number of carries, career-wise. Taylor is starting to get in that range. So, DJ Giddens, of course, we saw him as a rookie. Barely played. Special teams roles went to Goodson and Amir Abdullah a little bit more. I think that's what also hurt him here. But, yeah, Joel, it's a great question, and I think it's definitely an offseason exercise that the Colts have got to look into. I know Ballard specifically mentioned it. We've got to be able to establish it a little bit more. Not to act like Riley Leonard played a lot, but, the worst game of all those games was Week 18 against Houston, and they couldn't run in the first half or the second half when they were desperately trying to get Taylor the rushing record or the single season league lead there. So, yeah, it's a great question.
How many carries do you think he has between college and the NFL?
Oh, gosh. College, he was what, right at about 300 a year?
Do you want me to answer that, or are you thinking out loud?
I'm thinking out loud, but yeah, go ahead.
Yes, to answer your question.
So he had 3 years at Wisconsin of 300 a year. So that's 12 game seasons. In the NFL, I'd have no idea. What's he at?
Between college, the NFL, and the one playoff game he's played in, 2,948.
Yeah. And I think like 3,000 is what a lot of people look at. Boy, it's a big carry number. I've always felt he could be Derrick Henry, like a little bit of the outlier to the rule. He just seems like he's wired that way physically. Yeah. He's always been, they tell the stories of Wisconsin, that team plane lands from their road trip and he's heading straight for the ice bath. And some guys might say, I'm going to head straight to my DMs and then straight to the party. Like it's a little bit of a different way of thinking there. So yeah, it's not maybe the most front burner topic, but clearly there was, think about that correlation to wins and losses we just read off there.
Yeah.
And again, that's yards per carry. I always think it's very misleading when the NFL people give you like the rushing yard stats. When X player rushes for more than 100 yards, his team wins. Well, how much of that did he get 30 yards on the final drive of the game when they're trying to ice it?
True.
Like I think yards per carry is much more of an indicative stat, but it's still like an elementary enough number that we all can easily process it. So, boy, that's a big number that you just read off there.
Yeah. Second question on today's pod for Twitter questions comes from Tom, who would like to know who has the final say in roster control for the Colts. Looking at the roster over the last few seasons, I always wonder who has final say on it. For example, Ruben Lowry III, a waiver wire pickup from earlier this season, who was rostered the entire year, but was primarily in a healthy scratch during game days. Signed by the Ravens as an undrafted free agent in 2025. Tom's question here is who decides to claim him off waivers and to keep him rostered for an entire season without playing him? Is that a Lou Anarumo decision because of the scheme fit, or is that a Chris Ballard front office call, maybe viewing him as a Nick Cross or Kenny Moore replacement?
Yeah, Tom, it's a good question. I think when you see guys like Lowry, for example, go back to Jack Doyle, go back to Kenny Moore. When you see rookies claimed within that cycle, within that first year, whether it be at the cut downs like Jack Doyle and Kenny Moore the second, or like Ruben Lowry the third, when it's within the season, I tend to think that falls back on the draft process. We like said player during the draft. We couldn't get our hands on them. Now, here they are. And obviously you have some preseason film for a lot of these guys. I think Lowry maybe even started a game with Baltimore, to be honest with you. So there's a little bit of NFL film, but I think there still is we were enamored with them at some level during the draft. Let's go ahead and claim them. Now, as they get deeper into the NFL, then you have more history there from a pro scouting standpoint. You obviously have, coaches, Anarumo being the perfect example of it. Joe Bacci, Xavier Howard, Jermaine Pratt, his own history plays into some of it. So, I think there's a general mutual. You have to listen to other voices. The roster's too big, the league's too big, college football's too big for you to be the ultimate person. But that's why you hire and fire and have a scouting staff and trust their opinions. And obviously, you're trying to fit play styles into your scheme. Again, Ballard has really kept a lot of his scouting personnel together since the Grigson Polian days. When you think about it, whether it's Todd Vasvari or Kevin Rogers or John Shaw or Matt Turpinning or Jamie Moore, so many of those guys have been with this organization for a long, long time. Before Ballard, really. Which I don't know. I'd have to take a deeper dive if that's always something that you see. Ed Dodds, of course, has been with him, here since day one from their indie days here. So,
yeah.
I think for the most part, like people realize the Kenny Moore, the second story at this point, that one might not have been as much draft. That was the 2017 first year Ballard and Kevin Rogers, longtime pro scout. I'm trying to think of, I think his dad used to be the Notre Dame OC. He kind of said, hey, it's roster cut time. I really like this kid from New England. Yeah, he might not be the tallest, but look at his wingspan. It makes up for his lack of height, et cetera, et cetera. And at that point, Ballard's first year, which look at what Miami just did. I think your first year, you're super willing to part ways, with them and, or I should say make wholesale roster changes. So, I think that is something that you would look at. And they obviously, Ballard was, I think, open-minded to it. And, would he have done that a few years in? Maybe not as much as they would then late.
As always, thank you to those who submit questions. Joel, Tom, and now Jimmy. You can always DM Kevin or myself with your questions to get on to the podcast. This is from Jimmy to round out today's Twitter questions section. Hey, KB, understand that there is a lot left to be desired from Anthony Richardson, but from where I'm sitting, unless he absolutely refused, I would bring him back at least as the backup. There's been this tonal shift this year that AR can't do anything right anymore. But if you look at Daniel Jones before coming to Indianapolis, I think you can definitely argue that AR was a better quarterback. I'm not sure that Shane can't get higher highs out of AR if he absolutely has to. I said that to say the idea of getting rid of him for Riley Leonard seems a bit far-fetched for me. Again, I understand that he may not want to be here, so there may be a driving factor. But if they can make it work, I think it's absolutely necessary to keep Anthony Richardson. Please forgive me for being blue here, but it's a blank ridiculous that Colts think Dane Jones is the starting caliber by week 1 next season. That's an absolute joke.
Okay, a lot there. I guess let's start with the last part because it's fresh in my head. Yeah, I understand there are a lot of people out there confused almost by the Colts thinking Daniel Jones could be ready week 1. Again, we live in a Indianapolis bubble, Eddie, where Tyrese Halliburton will go from torn Achilles to playing a basketball game that'll be 16 months. That sound right? I think so. 15 months?
Yeah, somewhere around that.
And Daniel Jones will go 10 months. So, those are obviously 5-6 months. That is a big difference in timetables for two similarly aged individuals. That's a quarterback and point guard are the exact same, but as quarterback, you're asked to make sudden movements, unpredictable movements, a whole lot there. And I'll continue to say this until we get to September and maybe even beyond. When is Daniel Jones cleared? But most importantly, when is he normal?
Right.
That, to me, I think is the huge, huge question here for 2026. As far as Richardson is concerned, what Jimmy said, something to the effect here of if they can make it work. That, to me, I think is the big one. Are you in a financial puzzle right now where you can make $10.8 million work for your backup quarterback? And again, I'm calling him the backup. Let's just do that for the hypothetical. Let's say he's the backup over Riley Leonard. Are you in a position for $10.8 million to be that? Again, he's making 10 times the amount of money Riley Leonard is. if you are a win-now football team, if you have a heightened sense of urgency for this season, if you are in year 10 of a GM with that resume, or even year 4 for Shane Steichen with that resume, can you afford that? It seems a bit luxury here.
Right.
There are some comments Jimmy makes here that I don't think is that far-fetched. But still, that just seems like a situation that is very difficult for the Colts to be in. I have trouble finding a place for Nick Cross. I have trouble finding the answers in the front seven that are necessary. Do I have room for Anthony Richardson at $10.8 million? So,
got to remember what Chris Ballard said that at the end of season press conference when he was asked about cap space. He said, "Yeah, we'll be fine."
Yeah, he really downplayed it.
Yeah, we'll be good there.
So, I guess we'll see on that. The thing about Richardson, I don't think this is the most pressing thing because I don't think you get much more than a high-end day 3 draft pick. But if you do bring him back, and then you obviously don't pick up the 5th-year option on him, then you have to be content letting him walk for nothing. And that's a little bit of the Pierce thing, too.
Yeah.
Like, if you're not in a position right now to let anybody walk for nothing. I mean, that's what we just saw the Pacers do with Benedict Mathurin. So, Miles Turner, okay, that can be one thing. But if you start to let that happen a little bit more, and the Colts have really never, I think, we went over this a few pods ago. What did we come up with? Bobby Okereke?
Yeah.
As like the most quality player.
Yeah.
That ended up walking.
Malik Hooker?
Yeah, Hooker, if you want to go way back. So, to me, like, that's the game with Pierce. When I see, the Titans is the destination, the Patriots is the destination, blah, blah, blah. If the Colts want to, they can just slap the tag right there and then figure it out. I mean, I don't want to say slapping the tag just cures all, but it certainly helps you out big time. And who knows? To some people, not many players, but to some, that tag could be, I don't know, decently attractive. If you don't think you're getting $29 million outright annually, if you think you can still prove yourself even more, 1 year guarantee $29 million, and then you prove yourself, and then you cash in free agency, that can be decent. Now, that's probably the minority thinking of that, but that's still a thought that's out there.
It's a tool, right, Kevin?
A tool. That's what Chris Ballard says, right?
Yeah, it's a tool.
He calls it a tool, to say the least there. So, thank you, everybody, for the questions. Continue to send those in. Next week, I think we got to wait to see when Ballard and Steichen talk. I want to say Tuesday or Wednesday maybe for them. Seems kind of worthless, I think, to do one before they talk. So I'm going to say we're going to wait. I know here in the off seasons for the last month or so, we've been pretty much Monday or Tuesday with you. Let's hold off on that. Let's wait till we see a schedule on exactly when. I would guess either Tuesday afternoon or Wednesday.
Yep, just a reminder, the franchise tag window is open today. Closes March 3rd. The combine is the 23rd through the 2nd. There's not testing all those days. It's just when players start to report and get the medical stuff, interviews, this, that, and the other. Free agency, that before that quote-unquote legal tampering window starts on March 9th. The 11th is when free agency begins at 4 p.m. Eastern, and the NFL draft is April 23rd through the 25th.
Where are we this year? Pittsburgh?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. It's a pretty good draft town, right? Or NFL town?
All 600,000 people will be there.
Oh, gosh. Now you sound like Jay Query about draft crowds at the watching day 1, day 2, day 3. All right, he's Eddie Garrison. I'm Kevin Bowen. We'll have combine coverage live from downtown here coming up next week. 107.5 The Fan. Thank you.